My name is Robert Sterling. I'm 69 years old, and I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The night my son forced me out of my own company, the roast beef was still warm on the table. You know, there are unwritten rules in a family, or at least there used to be. You don't talk politics at a wedding, you don't ask for a loan at a funeral, and you certainly don't fire your father while he's carving the Sunday roast. But I guess my son, Jason, skipped that chapter in his MBA textbooks. It was a Sunday in late October, the kind of Pittsburgh evening where the chill just starts to settle in your bones, and you're grateful for a hot meal and a warm house. My wife, Ellen, had spent all afternoon on that roast. The house smelled like rosemary and onions, the smell of home. I was sitting at the head of the table, same spot I've sat in for 40 years. Jason was to my right. He was wearing a suit, which should have been my first clue. Who wears a tie to his parents' house on a Sunday? I picked up the carving knife, sharpening it against the steel. Shick, shick, shick. It's a sound I like. It means everyone is about to be fed. Dad, Jason said. He didn't look at me. He was looking at his fork, turning it over and over in his hands. Can I get you a slice of the end piece? I asked him. I know you like the crust. Dad, we need to talk about the quarterly review, he said. His voice was tight, dry. I laughed a little. Jason, pass the potatoes. We can talk business on Monday morning. Tonight is for your mother's cooking. That's when he reached under the table and pulled out a folder, a thick, blue legal folder. He placed it right next to the gravy boat. The board met on Friday, Dad, he said. Without you. I put the knife down. The room went very quiet. The only sound was the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Ellen stopped spooning out the carrots. She looked at him, then at me. The consensus, Jason continued, using that sterile corporate voice he learned at school, is that Sterling Metalworks needs a digital pivot. The market is shifting to automation. Your methods, your reliance on handshake deals and paper ledgers, the board feels it's an analog artifact in a digital world. He slid the folder toward me. It's a buyout package, Dad. Generous, full benefits, but effective immediately. I'm stepping in as interim CEO. I looked at the boy I taught to fish. I looked at the man whose first bicycle I assembled in the garage. He wasn't crying. He wasn't angry. He was just cold. He was treating me like a vendor who had missed a delivery date. You're firing me? I asked. My voice didn't shake. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. We're transitioning you, he corrected. Ideally, you'd announce your retirement. It looks better for the stock. I looked at Ellen. Her hand was over her mouth. She was waiting for me to yell, to flip the table, to throw him out. But I didn't. I'm a steel man. We don't bend when we get hit. We just get harder. I picked up the folder. I didn't open it. I just set it on the sideboard. Eat your potatoes, Jason, I said quietly. They're getting cold. He didn't eat. He left 10 minutes later. And that was the night I learned that you can raise a child, pay for his education, and give him the keys to the kingdom. And he'll still lock you out in the cold if he thinks it'll make him $1 richer. The next morning, I drove to the plant. Jason had told me I didn't need to come in, that he would have HR courier my personal effects to the house. To hell with that. I built Sterling Metalworks from a single garage bay in 1982. Every bolt, every beam, every machine in that building was there because I sweated for it. I wasn't going to let some 20-something from human resources pack up my life into a cardboard box. I pulled my truck into my spot. The sign still said, Robert Sterling, founder. I wondered how long it would take Jason to pry the letters off. Probably had a guy scheduled already. I walked onto the shop floor. The smell hit me first. That mix of ozone, cutting fluid, and hot steel. To some people it stinks. To me it smells like progress. It smells like rent paid and colleges funded. I walked past Unit 4, the big CNC lathe. I stopped and ran my hand along the safety guard. It was warm. The night shift had just finished. I remembered the blizzard of '93. The power lines were down all over the city. We had a deadline for the city bridge project. I brought in portable generators. Me and 3 guys slept on the floor right here, next to this machine, feeding it diesel and coffee for 3 days straight, so we wouldn't miss the shipment. Jason was 5 years old then. He was home drinking hot cocoa. He doesn't know that this machine didn't just appear here. It was kept alive by men who cared. I looked around the floor. It was a shift change. The young guys, the ones Jason hired, were standing by the time clock, scrolling on their phones, not talking to each other. Then I saw Big Mike, one of my oldest welders. He's 62. He saw me coming and wiped his hands on a rag. He knew. Bad news travels faster than light in a machine shop. "Morning, boss," Mike said. He didn't look me in the eye. He looked at his boots. "Morning, Mike," I said. "Is it true?" he asked. "About the transition?" "Looks that way," I said. Mike shook his head. "Kids make mistakes. He thinks the software runs the shop. He forgets it's the hands." "You keep your head down, Mike," I told him. "You've got 2 years until full pension. Don't let him provoke you." I walked up the metal stairs to the office. The crow's nest, we called it. I went to my desk. I didn't take much. I didn't want the stapler or the pens. I took 3 things. First, a framed photo of me and Jason on a fishing boat in Erie, holding up a base. He was smiling so wide in that picture. I put it face down in the box. Second, my old Estwing framing hammer. I used it to build the framing for this office. It's heavy, scarred, and perfectly balanced. Third, my Rolodex. Jason called it a dinosaur. He had all his contacts in the cloud, but my Rolodex had numbers of men who would answer the phone at 3 a.m. on a Sunday if I needed a favor. That wasn't company property. That was my reputation. I left the keys on the desk. They made a loud clatter against the glass. I walked back out through the yard. I didn't look back. They say you can't take it with you when you die, but nobody tells you how hard it is to leave it behind while you're still alive. I sat in my truck for a long time before I turned the key. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I wasn't sad anymore. I was starting to get angry, and for a man like me, anger is a fuel. Monday was a blur of phone calls I didn't answer and lawyers reading fine print. But Tuesday was the day reality hit. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. My internal clock doesn't care about board meetings or severance packages. My feet hit the floor before I remembered I had nowhere to go. I put on my coffee. I sat at the kitchen table. Usually by this time I'm reviewing production schedules or checking steel prices. That morning I was staring at a bird feeder in the backyard. "You could go back to bed," Ellen said, walking in with her robe on. She was trying to be sweet, but her voice had that tone, that worry. She was scared I was going to drop dead from boredom. "I'm not tired," I grunted. By 10 a.m., I had fixed a loose step on the back porch. It took me 15 minutes. By 11 a.m., I had reorganized the spice rack. Ellen shooed me out of the kitchen. By noon, I was sitting in my truck in the driveway, listening to talk radio, just to feel the vibration of an engine. I couldn't stay there. I put the truck in gear and drove. I told myself I was just going to the hardware store, but I didn't turn left toward the store. I turned right, toward the industrial district. I found myself driving past the old steel mills, down toward the river. And then, I saw it. Apex Fabrication. It was a competitor of ours, technically, but competitor is a strong word. Apex was a joke. It was run by a guy named Miller, who had been trying to retire to Florida for 10 years. The building was covered in soot. The fence was rusted, leaning at a 45-degree angle. The sign was missing the letter E, so it just said APX Fabrication. Jason used to make fun of this place. He'd drive by and say, "That's a graveyard, Dad. That's what happens when you don't modernize." I pulled my truck across the street and just watched. I saw the bay doors open. It was dark inside, dingy, but I heard the rhythm. Thump, hiss, grind. The machines were running. I sat there watching a forklift driver struggle to move a pallet across a cracked concrete floor. He was struggling because the floor was uneven, not because he was bad at his job. I looked at the building. It had good bones, pre-war steel structure, high ceilings. It had a rail spur out back that I knew hadn't been used in years. Jason saw a graveyard. I saw a sleeper car. I saw a shop that was failing not because the workers were bad or the market was gone, but because the man at the top had stopped caring. He had stopped greasing the gears. A feeling started in my chest. It wasn't the tightness of stress I'd felt for the last 5 years dealing with Jason's innovations. It was something else. It was lighter. It was excitement. My severance package was sitting in my bank account. A lot of zeros. Hush money. Jason thought he had paid me to go away. He thought he had bought my silence. I put the truck in drive, but I didn't go home. I pulled into the Apex parking lot. A man doesn't stop being a builder just because someone took away his hammer. He just finds a new tool, and I was looking at a very rusty, very expensive tool that needed a steady hand. I didn't go to the front office. I knew Miller wouldn't be there. I knew where Miller would be at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday. There's a diner on 4th Street called Sal's. Greasy Spoon, the kind of place where the waitress calls you honey and pours the coffee before you ask. I walked in. Sure enough, Miller was in the back booth, nursing a slice of cherry pie and reading the sports section. He looked tired. He looked like a man carrying a backpack full of rocks. I slid into the booth opposite him. He jumped a little. "Robert?" he said. "I heard the news. I heard Jason. Well, I heard there were changes." "Changes," I said. "That's one word for it." The waitress came over. "Coffee black," I said. I looked at Miller. "How's Florida looking this time of year, Jim?" He sighed, putting down his fork. "Ideally, it looks like a condo in Boca. Realistically, it looks like another 5 years of grinding out payroll in this rust bucket town. I can't sell the place, Robert. Nobody wants a shop with old machines. Everyone wants shiny and new, like what Jason is building. I don't want shiny," I said. Miller squinted at me. "What are you talking about?" "I want to buy Apex," I said. "Lock, stock, and barrel. The land, the machines, the client list, and the debts. Everything." Miller laughed, a dry, hacking laugh. "You're retired, Robert. You got the golden parachute. Go play golf." I leaned in. "I hate golf, and I hate sitting on my porch. I've got cash, Jim. No banks, no financing approval. I can write you a check today that clears tomorrow. You can be in Boca by Friday." The laughter stopped. He saw I was serious. He looked around the diner to see if anyone was listening. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you want my headache?" "Because I know how to cure it," I said. "But I have conditions." "What conditions?" "Number 1, the sale stays off the public record for 30 days. We do it through a holding company. My name doesn't appear on the door until I say so." "You don't want Jason to know," Miller realized. A grin spread across his face. "You sly old fox." "Number 2, I continued. I keep the crew. Nobody gets fired. I evaluate everyone myself." Miller nodded. He pulled a napkin from the dispenser and took a pen from his pocket. He wrote a number on the napkin. It was a fair price. A little high for the condition of the shop, but fair for the speed of the deal. I looked at the number. I didn't haggle. I nodded. We shook hands over the table. His grip was loose, relieved. Mine was tight. "I'll have the lawyers draft the transfer tomorrow," Miller said, looking lighter already. "Good," I said. "Enjoy the sunshine, Jim." I walked out of the diner. I stood on the sidewalk and took a deep breath. The air smelled like diesel and rain. I pulled out my cell phone. Not the company phone Jason took back, but my personal flip phone. I scrolled through the contacts. I stopped at a name. Frankie the Torch Russo, the best foreman I ever had. Jason fired him 3 months ago because Frankie didn't know how to use an iPad. I hit the dial. "Hello?" Frankie answered. He sounded groggy, like he'd been sleeping in the middle of the day. "Frankie?" I said. "It's Robert Sterling." "Boss?" Frankie's voice perked up. "I heard what they did to you. It's a damn shame." "Don't worry about that, Frankie," I said. "I need you to find your work boots." "Why? Are you building a deck?" "No," I said, smiling for the first time in 3 days. "We're not building a deck. We're going to war. Meet me at Apex Fabrication tomorrow at 600, and bring anyone else Jason fired who still knows how to work." Jason thought he had bought my silence with that severance check. Instead, he just funded his own destruction. The first week at Apex Fabrication wasn't about strategy meetings. It was about bleach, degreaser, and sweat. I walked in on Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. Frankie the Torch Russo was already there. He was standing in the middle of the shop floor, hands on his hips. looking up at a crane hoist that looked like it hadn't moved since the Reagan administration. Frankie is 64. He's got knees that click when he walks, and a welding scar on his neck shaped like a lightning bolt. Jason fired him because he said Frankie lacked digital agility. "Well, boss," Frankie said, spitting on the concrete, "she's ugly, but she's got good bones." "We're not dating her, Frankie," I said. "We're putting her to work." Who else showed up? 3 other trucks pulled in. Big Mike, the machinist, Sal, who could fix a hydraulic line with duct tape and a prayer, and Old Man Jenkins, who was 72 and technically deaf in one ear, but could hear a bearing grind from across a noisy room. These were the cast-offs, the dead weight my son had trimmed from the payroll to boost his margins. "All right, boys," I said. "Forget the office. We don't need desks. We need this floor operational by Monday. Frankie, check the electrical on the press brake. Mike, strip down that CNC lathe. I bet the ways are gummed up with 20 years of grime. Sal, find out why the roof is leaking." For the next 4 days, we didn't cut a single piece of steel. We cleaned. We scrubbed layers of grease off the concrete until our knuckles bled. We took apart machines that Miller had neglected, replaced the seals, greased the fittings, and calibrated the lasers. It felt good. There's an honesty in manual labor that you don't get in a boardroom. When you scrub a floor, you see the result immediately. While we were knee-deep in solvent, I got a call from one of my old vendors, a steel supplier named Gary. "Robert," Gary said, "you won't believe what your boy is doing over at Sterling." "Enlighten me, Gary." "He's renovating the executive suite, knocking down walls, importing Italian marble for the reception desk. He's spending $100,000 on furniture while he's asking me to extend his credit terms on sheet metal." I looked at my office at Apex. It was a glass box in the corner of the warehouse. The desk was metal, dented, and bought at an army surplus auction. My chair squeaked. "Let him buy the marble, Gary," I said. "Comfort makes a man soft." By Sunday night, Apex Fabrication was transformed. It wasn't pretty. The paint was still peeling on the outside. But inside, it hummed. We fired up the main compressor at 8 hours p.m. It purred. No rattles. No leaks. Frankie wiped his forehead with a black rag. "She's ready to dance, boss." "But who are we dancing with? We got no customers." I patted the newly polished control panel of the lathe. "Don't worry about the customers, Frankie. In this town, word travels. And right now, Sterling Metalworks is looking a lot like a country club, and we're looking like a machine shop. The work will find us. You can paint a machine as many times as you want, but if you don't grease the gears, it's just a pretty piece of junk." Jason never understood that. He was busy polishing the hood while the engine was seizing up. The phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. It was the landline, a dusty old unit I hadn't replaced yet. I picked it up. "Apex Fabrication." There was a pause. "Is this Robert?" I recognized the voice immediately. Dan Miller, no relation to the previous owner. Dan was the purchasing manager for city infrastructure, the biggest municipal contractor in the state. I'd done business with Dan for 20 years. "Hello, Dan," I said. "Robert, I thought you retired," Dan said. "I called your cell. It was disconnected. I called Sterling, and they put me through to a voicemail box. I called around, and someone said you bought this dump." "It's not a dump anymore, Dan. Ideally, I'm retired. Realistically, I got bored. Look, I don't have time for pleasantries." Dan sounded stressed, panicked even. "We have a problem, a big one. The highway barrier project. We need 400 anchor bolts, grade 8 steel, custom thread. Jason promised them 3 weeks ago." I knew exactly what happened. Jason probably forgot to order the specific steel stock because his inventory software hadn't been updated. "Let me guess," I said. "He missed the delivery." "He missed it twice," Dan snapped. "And now his secretary is telling me there's a global supply chain disruption. I've got a crew of 40 guys standing on a highway doing nothing, costing the city 10 grand a day. Robert, can you help me?" I looked at the schedule board. It was empty. I looked at Frankie, who was eating a sandwich on the forklift. "I can do it, Dan." "Can you match his price?" Dan asked. "Because the city budget is tight." "No, I said flatly. I can't match his price. His price is for a product that doesn't exist. My price is for bolts that will be in your hands on Friday morning. I'm charging you 20% more for the rush. Silence on the line. Then, a sigh. Do it. Just get them to me. I need a PO number, Dan. I'll email the contract in the morning. Just start. Dan, I said, dropping my voice. You know me. My word is the contract. I'll see you Friday. I hung up. Frankie, drop the sandwich. We've got work. For the next 3 days we lived in that shop. We ran 2 12-hour shifts. Me, Frankie, Big Mike, and Sal. We didn't have the automated robotic arms Jason had at Sterling. We had hands. We hand-threaded those bolts. We checked every single one with a micrometer. At 2:09 a.m. on Thursday, the coffee pot broke. We boiled water in a clean ladle with an oxyacetylene torch just to make instant coffee. We laughed about it. The shop smelled like hot oil and victory. On Friday morning, I drove the flatbed truck to the construction site myself. I pulled up right as the foreman was yelling at his crew. I dropped the tailgate. 4 crates, 400 bolts. Perfect condition. Dan walked over. He looked like he wanted to kiss me. He signed the delivery slip. You saved my ass, Robert, he said. Next contract? I'm not even calling Sterling. I'm calling you. I drove back to the shop with a check in my pocket. We celebrated with 3 pizzas and a case of cheap beer on the loading dock. To the global supply chain disruption, Frankie toasted, raising a beer. To competence, I corrected him. In my day, a handshake was a contract. My son needed a 30-page PDF to promise he'd show up on time, and he still missed the date. 2 weeks later, I was back at the Sunday dinner table. I made a point to keep this routine. If I stopped showing up for Sunday roast, Jason might get suspicious. Plus, I wanted to see him. I wanted to look him in the eye while I was slowly dismantling his empire from the shadows. The mood had shifted since the firing. Jason wasn't cold and corporate anymore. He was agitated. He was checking his phone every 30 seconds. No phones at the table, Ellen said gently. She was trying to keep the peace. Bless her heart. Jason slammed the phone down face up. Sorry, Mom. It's just the market is irrational right now. We're losing bids on small jobs. Nuisance stuff. I sliced a piece of ham. Oh? Who are you losing to? Some garage called Apex Fabrication, Jason scoffed. He took a swig of wine. It's a bottom feeder operation. They're picking up the scraps I don't want anyway. But it's annoying. They're undercutting our lead times. I chewed slowly. Apex, I said, testing the word in my mouth. I remember that place. Miller's shop. Isn't it falling down? Apparently someone bought it, Jason said. Some holding company. Probably a shell corporation for foreign investors trying to get a foothold. They don't understand the local ecosystem. They'll burn through their cash in 6 months and fold. I'm not worried. He looked worried. He looked like a man who was hearing footsteps behind him in a dark alley. Well, I said, maybe you should focus on your quality control. If you're better, you won't lose the bids. Jason rolled his eyes. It's not about quality, Dad. It's about agility. We're pivoting to high-margin aerospace contracts. Let the cockroaches at Apex fight over the highway bolts. We're going to be building satellites. Satellites. The boy couldn't even deliver threaded rods on time, and he wanted to build parts for space. Just make sure you don't pivot so hard you fall over, I said quietly. Ellen kicked me under the table. So, Dad, Jason said, changing the subject. How's retirement? You look tired. You been golfing? I looked at my hands. There was a tiny cut on my thumb from a metal shaving I hadn't noticed earlier. There was grease under my fingernail that the soap hadn't quite reached. I hid my hand under the napkin. Oh, you know, I said. Keeping busy, tinkering in the garage, fixing things that are broken. That's good, Jason said, dismissing me. Glad you're relaxing. I took a sip of water to hide the smile. He was so arrogant, so sure that I was just an old man fading away. He didn't realize that the foreign investor he was terrified of was sitting across from him, asking for the salt. There's a special kind of satisfaction in listening to a man complain about a fire, knowing you're the one holding the matches. I wasn't lying to him. I was just letting him believe the lie he created for himself, that he was the future, and I was the past. A month went by. Apex was breaking even. We were picking up speed. But to really take Sterling down, I needed him to make a mistake. A fatal one. I didn't have to wait long. To fund his aerospace pivot and his office renovations, Jason had to cut costs somewhere. He fired the quality assurance manager, a guy named Pete, who had been with me for 15 years. Then he switched steel suppliers. He dropped Gary, my old supplier, and signed a contract with an overseas importer, Global Steel Solutions. The name sounds fancy. The product is garbage. It's cheap steel, often full of impurities, brittle in the cold. I knew this because Gary called me to complain. He dropped me, Robert. For pennies on the pound, he's buying grade B stock and selling it as grade A. That's dangerous, Gary, I said. It's criminal, Gary replied. It happened on a Tuesday in November. A cold snap hit the state. I was in the office at Apex when the news broke. A local news station was reporting from the site of a new commercial warehouse being built in the North County. Construction halted at Amazon Distribution Center after roof truss failure. I turned up the volume on the small TV I kept in the corner. The reporter was standing in front of a twisted heap of metal. A main support beam had snapped, clean in half, just from the weight of the snow and the cold. Preliminary reports suggest defective steel fabrication, the reporter said. The steel was supplied by Sterling Metal Works. My stomach dropped, not out of joy, but out of shame. That was my name, my father's name, Sterling. It stood for quality. And now, it was being dragged through the mud on the 6:00 news because my son wanted to save 4% on materials. The phone rang. It was Frankie. He was out on the floor. Boss, are you seeing this? I see it, Frankie. That's the end of them, Frankie said. Nobody's going to insure a job with Sterling Steel now. I sat there for a moment. I felt a heavy sadness. I built that reputation for 40 years. It took 30 years to build it up, and 30 seconds of bad judgment to crumble it into dust. But then, the sadness turned into resolve. I couldn't save the name Sterling right now, but I could save the work. Frankie, I said, get the truck ready. Where are we going? We're going to that job site, the Amazon Distribution Center. Boss, they'll kick us off. No, they won't, I said, because I'm going to offer to replace that beam by tomorrow morning for cost. I want the general contractor to know that there are still men in this town who know how to work steel. And what about Jason? Frankie asked. Jason is about to find out what happens when you build a house on sand, I said. I grabbed my coat. This was it. This was the moment we went from being a nuisance to being the replacement. I wasn't doing this to destroy my son. I was doing it to stop him from hurting anyone else. Business is a game, sure, but when steel snaps, people die, and I wasn't going to let my family name be written on a tombstone. Jason didn't come to Apex to apologize. He came to kill us. It was 3 days after the truss failure at the Amazon site. I had fixed the problem. My team fabricated a replacement beam overnight and delivered it. The general contractor was singing our praises. Sterling Metal Works, on the other hand, was bleeding. I was under a flatbed trailer, welding a cracked frame, when I heard the tires crunch on the gravel. Not a truck. High-performance rubber. I slid out from under the trailer and wiped my mask. Through the open bay door, I saw it. Jason's silver Porsche. It looked ridiculous parked next to the rusted dumpsters and the pile of scrap metal. He stepped out. Italian suit, no tie, sunglasses. He looked like he was inspecting a hazardous waste site. He walked right past the office sign and marched onto the shop floor. He was looking for the owner. He was looking for a fight. I stayed still. I watched him approach Frankie. Where is he? Jason barked. Where is the owner of this chop shop? Frankie, bless him, didn't flinch. He just leaned on his broom. He's busy. I don't care if he's busy, Jason shouted. His voice cracked. He was desperate. You people poached my client. You undercut my bid. I'm here to buy you out or sue you into the ground. Get your boss out here now. I stood up. I was wearing my old, grease-stained blue coveralls. My face was covered by the welding helmet. I walked up behind him. You can't buy what isn't for sale, son. Jason spun around. He stared at the welding mask. He didn't recognize the voice at first. It was muffled by the plastic. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Take that thing off." I reached up. I unclipped the mask and pulled it off my head. The silence that followed was heavier than the steel beam we just shipped. Jason's face went pale, then red, then pale again. He looked at me, then at the shop, then back at me. The pieces slammed together in his mind. The mysterious investor, the lost bids, the sudden competence of a failing competitor. "Dad," he whispered. Then the anger hit. "You?" he screamed. "You're doing this? You're sabotaging me?" "I haven't done a thing to you, Jason," I said calmly. "I bought a dying shop. I hired the men you fired, and I answered the phone when your customers called. That's not sabotage. That's business. You stole my clients." "Your clients left you," I corrected him, "because you gave them bad steel and worse excuses. I just gave them a place to land." He looked around the shop. He saw the men working. He saw the order board full of jobs, his old jobs. "I'll sue you," he hissed. "Conflict of interest, breach of something." "I'm not an employee of Sterling Metalworks," I reminded him. "You fired me, remember? Transitioned. I'm a free agent, Jason, and I'm eating your lunch." He took a step back. The arrogance was cracking. Beneath the anger, I saw it, the terror. He realized for the first time that the old man wasn't just a figurehead. I was the engine, and he had cut the fuel line to his own car. "Get out of my shop," I said quietly, "unless you need a job. But you're not qualified for the machines we run here." The look on his face wasn't anger anymore. It was fear. For the first time in his life, he realized the safety net was gone. I knew the confrontation wouldn't stay a secret. Jason stormed out of there, tires spinning, spraying gravel all over my clean concrete. But here's the thing about blue-collar work. We talk. Frankie called his cousin, who still worked the shipping dock at Sterling. Big Mike texted his brother-in-law, who ran the CNC line at Sterling. By lunch break, every single employee at Jason's company knew two things. 1, Robert Sterling was back in the game. 2, he was winning. I didn't have to recruit anyone. I didn't have to put out an ad. The next morning, Thursday, I arrived at Apex at 6:00 a.m. There were 5 pickup trucks parked at my gate. I got out of my truck. It was the old guard, the guys I had hired 20 years ago. The guys Jason had kept around only because he couldn't figure out how to replace them with software yet. There was Tom, the master welder. There was Shorty Evans, the best fabricator in the tri-state area. "Morning, boss," Tom said. He was holding his toolbox. "Tom," I said, "you're supposed to be on shift at Sterling in 30 minutes. "I quit," Tom said simply. "Gave him my notice this morning. Told him effective immediately." "You walk away from a pension, Tom. Jason froze the pension contributions last month." Tom spat on the ground. "Said he needed capital for the rebranding. I'm done working for a suit who doesn't know a wrench from a ratchet. We heard you were hiring. We want in." I looked at the line of men. These were men with mortgages, men with families, and they were walking away from the big, shiny corporate company to work in my drafty, reclaimed warehouse. "I can't match your seniority pay right away," I warned them. "We're lean here. We don't care," Shorty said. "We want to work for a man who pays on time and respects the trade. We'll take a cut." I unlocked the gate. "Get your gear inside. Safety briefing in 10 minutes. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Gary, the steel supplier. "Robert," he laughed. "It's a ghost town over there. I just dropped a delivery at Sterling. The floor's empty. Machines are silent. Jason is running around the office screaming at HR, but there's nobody left to fire. They all walked." I felt a surge of pride, but also a pang of pity. A machine shop without machinists is just a museum. Jason had the brand, the building, and the bank loans, but I had the hands. He tried to replace the men with temp agencies. I heard he brought in a crew of green kids. They broke 3 drill bits in the first hour and ruined a $10,000 casting. You can buy labor, but you can't buy loyalty. That has to be earned, day by dirty day. Jason thought people were interchangeable parts. He found out the hard way that when the parts walk out the door, The machine stops. The end came faster than I expected. I thought Jason would bleed out over 6 months. He lasted 3 weeks. When the workers left, production stopped. When production stopped, he missed the deadlines for the big aerospace contracts he had bet the farm on. Those contracts had penalty clauses, massive ones. Then the bank called. I know the banker, George. We play cards sometimes. George is a fair man, but he answers to the numbers. And Jason's numbers were a disaster. It was a Tuesday night. It was snowing. A wet, heavy snow. I was sitting by the fire, reading a book. Ellen was knitting. The doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I opened it. Jason was standing on the porch. He looked 10 years older than he had 3 weeks ago. His suit was rumpled. He wasn't wearing a coat. He was shivering. "Come in," I said. He walked into the kitchen. He sat at the table, the same table where he fired me. He put his head in his hands. "The bank is calling the note," he said. His voice was hollow. "They're foreclosing on the building. They're seizing the assets. Dad, I'm going to lose everything. My house, the car, the company." Ellen got up to make him tea. I stayed seated. "I need a loan," Jason said, looking up. His eyes were red. "I need $2 million to cover the penalties and get the line moving again. I know you have it. I know the buyout money I gave you is sitting there, plus whatever you made with Apex." He reached out his hand. "Please, Dad, bail me out. I'll pay you back with interest. I just need a bridge." I looked at my son. I loved him. God knows I loved him. It would have been so easy to write the check, to fix it, to pat him on the head and say, "It's okay, Daddy's here." But if I did that, he would never learn. He would just wait for the next bailout. He would continue to treat people like numbers because he never felt the pain of the zero. "No," I said. The word hung in the air. "No?" Jason blinked. "But you're my father." "I am," I said. "And that's why I'm saying no. A loan won't fix this, Jason. You don't have a money problem. You have a leadership problem. If I give you money, you'll just burn it. So you're going to let me drown?" He stood up, angry again. "You're going to watch me go bankrupt?" "I'm not going to give you a loan," I said calmly. "I'm going to make you an offer." I slid a piece of paper across the table. I had drawn it up with my lawyer that morning. "I will buy Sterling Metalworks," I said. "I will pay off the bank debts. I will absorb the liabilities, and I will take 100% ownership of the company. You want to buy it back?" Jason sneered. "For how much?" "For the debt," I said. "You walk away with nothing, but you don't declare bankruptcy. You keep your house, but the company is mine." He stared at the paper. It was a humiliating offer. It was a total surrender. Saving him would have been the easy thing to do, I thought to myself. But a father's job isn't to make life easy. It's to make his children men. "Take the deal, Jason," I said softly. "It's the only lifeboat you're going to get." The closing took place at the lawyer's office downtown. Neutral ground. The conference room was all mahogany and leather. The kind of room Jason loved. The kind I tolerated. My lawyer, a heavy-set guy named Bill, sat on my right. Jason was alone. He couldn't afford his high-priced legal team anymore. The stack of documents was 3 inches thick. The transfer of deeds, the assumption of debt, the dissolution of the current board of directors. I watched Jason sign. Scratch, scratch, scratch. 6 months ago, he sat in a room just like this and signed the papers to kick me out. He was smug then. He was holding a glass of champagne. Now, he was holding a cheap ballpoint pen, and his hand was trembling. He signed the last page. He pushed the stack toward me. "It's done," Jason said. He sounded defeated. "Congratulations, Dad. You won. You got your company back. I hope you're happy." He started to stand up. He looked like a man heading to the gallows. "Sit down, Jason," I said. He froze. "Why? It's over. I'm leaving." "I didn't say you were fired," I said. He frowned. "What?" "I bought the company," I said. "But I need people to run it. I'm merging Apex and Sterling. We're going to be busy." You want me to stay?" Hope flickered in his eyes. "You want me to stay on as VP? Or strategy director?" I laughed. A short, sharp bark. "No," I said. "I don't need a strategy director. I need a shift manager. Jason's jaw dropped. Shift manager? Dad, that's a foreman's job. That's an hourly position. It is, I agreed. You start Monday. You wear boots, not a suit. You report to Frankie the Torch Russo. You're going to learn how the machines work. You're going to learn the names of the men who operate them. You're going to learn how to check the grade of steel before you order it. Jason looked insulted. I have an MBA. You want me to sweep floors? I want you to learn the business, I said, leaning forward. You skipped the work and went straight to the corner office. That's why you failed. Now you're going to do it the right way. Or you can walk out that door and find a job at Starbucks. It's your call. The room was silent. I could hear the hum of the air conditioner. Jason looked at the door. Then he looked at me. He saw that I wasn't trying to humiliate him. I was offering him a ladder. It was a greasy, rusty ladder, but it led up. Monday? He asked quietly. 0600, I said. Don't be late. Frankie hates it when people are late. The signature on the contract looked the same as it did a year ago, but the hand holding the pen was shaking this time. But as he walked out of that office, he looked lighter. He had lost his crown, but he had kept his job, and for the first time, he was going to earn his paycheck. I signed the final line. Robert Sterling, owner. I capped my pen. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt relieved. The ship was back under command. Now, I just had to teach the mutineer how to sail. The first Monday of the new era wasn't about ribbons or balloons. It was about demolition. We moved the Apex crew back into the main Sterling Metalworks facility. It was strange walking back into the building I had been kicked out of. It still smelled new, that sterile cleaning fluid smell that Jason liked. All right, boys, I shouted over the echo of the empty shop floor. First order of business. See those cubicles on the mezzanine? The ones with the glass walls? Frankie grinned. He was holding a sledgehammer. Yeah, boss. Tear 'em down, I said. We don't hide behind glass here. We work on the floor. It took 2 days to strip the corporate out of the building. We brought the coffee machine back down to the shop level. We threw out the motivational posters that said things like synergy and put up, the safety charts and the production schedules. And then there was Jason. He showed up at 5:50 a.m. on Monday. He wasn't wearing his Italian loafers. He was wearing a pair of Red Wing boots. Brand new, stiff, probably hurting his feet already. He had on a pair of Carhartt pants that looked like they'd never seen dirt. He walked up to Frankie. The dynamic had flipped. Frankie used to report to Jason. Now, Jason was the grunt. Reporting for duty, Jason said, trying to keep his voice steady. Frankie looked him up and down. He didn't smile. Grab a broom, kid. Bay 4 needs sweeping before we start the layout. I watched from the catwalk. It was hard to watch, honestly. My son, who had been flying first class and ordering $500 wines, was pushing a broom, coughing in the dust. The other men watched him too. They weren't jeering, but they weren't helping him either. They were testing him. By Wednesday, Jason was on the line, feeding stock into the bandsaw. It's boring, repetitive work. Your back aches. Your hands get cut. I walked by him on Thursday afternoon. He was sweating. There was a smear of grease across his forehead. He looked miserable. Are you doing okay? I asked, stopping next to him. He stopped the saw. He looked at me. For a second, I thought he was going to quit. I thought he was going to throw his safety glasses on the floor and storm out. My back is killing me, he said. Lift with your knees, I said. He nodded. The blade is dulling, he said. I can feel the vibration changing. I paused. He was right. The blade was about to drift. Good catch, I said. Change it out. Lockout tagout procedure. Don't skip steps. Yes, sir, he said. He went back to work. He didn't ask for a break. He didn't ask when he could have his office back. A building is just bricks and steel. It's the spirit inside that keeps the roof from caving in. And for the first time in years, the spirit in that building was real. We were one crew again, and the man sweeping the floor had the last name Sterling, just like the name on the sign. 6 months went by. The seasons changed from winter slush to spring rain. The company was profitable again. Not tech startup profitable, but real profitable. We were making things, shipping them on time and getting paid. The bank debt was clearing up. Jason was still on the floor. He had graduated from sweeping to operating the CNC mill. He was good at it too. He had the math skills for the programming, but now he had the touch for the material. It happened on a Friday afternoon. We were rushing a job for the naval shipyard. High-pressure valves, complex geometry. I was in the office reviewing the payroll when Jason knocked on the door frame. He was wearing his coveralls. They were stained with oil and coolant. He didn't look like a catalog model anymore. He looked like a machinist. "Dad, we have a problem," he said. My stomach tightened. "What broke?" "Nothing broke," he said. "But look at the specs for the valve housing." He laid the blueprint on my desk. His finger, calloused now, with a black fingernail from a hammer mishap last month, pointed to a dimension. "The client specified a tolerance of 0.05, Jason explained. "But if we machine it to that, the seal is going to seat too deep. Under high pressure, it'll blow. The spec is wrong." The engineer on their side made a math error. I looked at the drawing. I pulled out my calculator. I ran the numbers. He was right. If we had built it exactly as asked, the valve would have failed. It could have caused a catastrophic leak on a ship. "Did you catch this?" I asked. "Yeah," Jason said. "I was setting up the toolpath and it just looked wrong. So I did the trig by hand. 6 months ago, Jason would have just forwarded the order to the floor and blamed the client when it failed. He would have covered his ass with an email paper trail. But today, he stopped the line. He cared about the product. "Get the client on the phone," I said. Jason called the naval engineer. He was respectful but firm. He explained the error. He suggested a fix. I watched him. He wasn't speaking corporate. He was speaking engineer. When he hung up, he let out a long breath. "They thanked us," he said. "They're sending a revised drawing in 10 minutes. "Good work, Jason," I said. "Does this mean I can go home early?" He joked. "No," I smiled. "It means you buy the first round tonight." That evening, we sat on the tailgate of my truck in the parking lot. Me, Frankie, and Jason. We were drinking cold beers as the sun went down over the industrial park. Jason took a swig. He looked tired. He looked greasy. He looked sore. "You know," Jason said, looking at the factory, "I used to hate the smell of this place. I thought it smelled like failure, like old men stuck in the past." "And now?" Frankie asked. Jason smiled. "Now? It smells like money." Frankie laughed and clapped him on the shoulder. I looked at my son. I'd never been prouder of him. Not when he graduated college. Not when he got his MBA. But right now, sitting on a tailgate with dirty hands, having saved a client from a disaster. He wasn't just sterling by blood anymore. He was a sterling by trade. 2 months later, I walked into the shop with a box. It was the same cardboard box I had carried out a year ago. But this time, I wasn't angry. I called a meeting on the floor. Everyone gathered around. The old Apex crew, the Sterling guys, the new hires. "Listen up," I said. "I'm 70 years old next month. My knees hurt when it rains, and my wife has a travel brochure for Italy that she's been looking at for 5 years. The men chuckled. "I came back here to save this company," I said. "And we did. We're solid. But a company can't rely on one old man forever." I looked at Frankie. "Frankie, step forward." Frankie looked confused. "Frankie is your new general manager," I announced. "He runs the floor. What he says goes. He knows more about steel than the rest of you put together." The men cheered. Frankie turned red. "And," I continued, pointing to Jason, "Jason is stepping up as VP of Operations." The room went quiet. They were waiting to see if this was nepotism again. "But," I added, "he reports to Frankie." The room erupted in laughter. Jason laughed the loudest. He shook Frankie's hand. "Don't go easy on me, boss," Jason said. "I never do." Frankie grinned. I walked back to my office. I put the keys on the desk. "The same desk?" Jason walked in a minute later. "You're really leaving?" he asked. "I am," I said. "For real this time. Ellen booked the flights this morning." Jason looked down at his boots. "I don't know if I'm ready, Dad. What if the market shifts again? What if I mess up?" "You will mess up," I said. "Everyone does. But now you have Frankie, and you have the crew, and you have the knowledge that you can fix things with your own hands. You're not floating anymore, son. You're grounded." I patted the desk. "It's your chair now. Don't get too comfortable in it. Spend half your day out there." "I will." he promised. I picked up my box. I had the photo of us, fishing. I had my framing hammer. "Dad?" Jason said as I reached the door. "Yeah? Thank you," he said. His voice was thick with emotion. "For not bailing me out. For firing me, basically. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was the hardest thing I ever did," I admitted. I walked out through the shop. The noise was deafening. The grinders, the welders, the hiss of the compressors. It was a symphony. I waved to Big Mike. I waved to Sal. I walked out into the sunlight. I got into my truck. The first time I left, I walked away with my head down, feeling like I had been robbed. This time, I didn't even look back. I didn't need to. I knew the shop was in good hands. I started the engine. I had a date with my wife, and after that, a flight to Rome. I'm sitting on my back porch now. It's a Sunday. The birds are singing. The coffee tastes good. I haven't been to the shop in 3 months. Jason sends me the monthly reports. The numbers are green, but more importantly, he sends me pictures. Last week, he sent me a photo of the company barbecue. He was manning the grill. The crew was laughing. That's a healthy company. You know, getting old is a strange thing. The world tries to tell you that you're done. The commercials, the movies, the corporate boards, they all tell you that your time has passed, that you're obsolete, that you should just step aside and let the digital natives run the show. They tell you that experience doesn't matter anymore because everything can be Googled, but they're wrong. You can Google the melting point of steel, but you can't Google the smell of it when it's about to crack. You can't download the instinct that tells you a man is lying to you about a delivery date. You can't program a computer to earn the respect of a room full of pipe fitters. That stuff, that's earned. It's earned in the sweat and the mistakes and the long years of showing up when you didn't want to. My son thought he could skip the line. He thought the degree on his wall made him a leader. He had to learn that the degree just gets you in the building. It's your character that keeps you there. I see a lot of men my age who feel pushed out. They feel like the world moved on without them. If you're listening to this and you feel that way, let me tell you something. Rust isn't a sign of weakness. Rust is just a sign that the steel underneath has survived the storm. Don't let them tell you you're done. If they take your job, find another one. If they take your hammer, find a wrench. If they close the door, build a window. We are the generation that built the foundations this country stands on. We poured the concrete. We welded the beams. And as long as we're breathing, we've still got work to do. Even if that work is just teaching the next generation how to hold the torch properly. My name is Robert Sterling. I'm 70 years old. I'm a father, a husband, and a steel man. And finally, truly, I'm retired. But if that phone rings and they need me, well, I've still got my boots in the truck. Thanks for listening.